Good morning. All right. Good morning. My name's Ryan LaFollette. I have the privilege of being the chair of the SAEM23 program committee, and I'm thrilled to welcome you here to Austin and to the largest SAEM event in our history. So welcome. This year you can find cutting-edge didactic scientific abstracts in every room, from lightning oral presentations to e-posters to the excellent plenaries that we're about to hear at the end of today's session. We have a huge breadth and depth of didactic presentations with thought leaders and faculty from around the world, not to mention our learner-focused games, Sim Wars, Sona games, which are can't-miss engagement. As part of the program committee for the last decade, I have been witness to the efforts and the passions of incredible people in this room that make this society and its accomplishments possible. And I'm humbled to be part of the program committee, the people sitting at this desk, and all of you. So I appreciate that. I also want to welcome the emergency medicine pharmacotherapy with resuscitation attendees to our annual meeting. Yesterday, Empower RX hosted a full day of education on the latest in resuscitation, emergency medicine pharmacotherapy, and administrative issues that are unique to practicing emergency medicine pharmacists in the ED. We're honored to be able to host this innovative and robust conference in conjunction with SAEM, and thank you all for coming. SAEM annual meetings are renowned for the expansive networking opportunities and career development opportunities they offer. So take advantage of opportunities like speed mentoring for educators, and the residency and fellowship fair to find peers, leaders, and others who can make you and your career and take them to the next level. And there's a full exhibit hall upstairs with products and services that can take your practice and your career there as well. Also tomorrow, in the same room at the same time, we'll be having our education keynote, Perspectives in Medical Education, Past Experiences, Future Possibilities, with Dr. Susan Promise. Be sure to join us here at 9 a.m. for both that keynote as well as the next 4 plenaries that are education-focused. This week would not be possible without countless individuals and their contributions, and so many of our member leaders. Let us take a moment to recognize the SAEM Board of Directors, the SAEM Foundation Board of Trustees, the RAMS Board, my program committee members, and every academy, committee, and interest group leader for your time, your energy. If I just described you, please stand up and let's give you a round of applause. All right, the annual meeting would certainly not be possible without the contributions of the SAEM staff. So I would also like to extend a heartfelt thanks to our 20 staff members for their incredible work at this meeting. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our facilitators for this morning's award ceremony, Dr. Angela Mills, President of SAEM, and Dr. Adrian Tyndall, President of the SAEM Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to be here with all of you. I want to start by thanking Dr. LaFollette for his leadership in putting together a truly excellent program. It's really a ton of work to make the annual meeting happen, and they've done a fantastic job. Please join me in a huge round of applause for Dr. LaFollette and the program committee. It's great to see so many familiar faces here with us today, and several new ones too. To all of you that have been with SAEM since its inception, and even before, thank you for your contributions that have helped make this the academic home for emergency medicine. We really would not be here without you today. And to those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. We hope to get to know each of you personally and professionally, and to help you begin your careers as future academic emergency medicine leaders.
Good morning. I'm from the South, now in Atlanta, and people say good morning really hard back, or I don't speak. Good morning. It's good to see all of you here this bright and early morning. So, as the outgoing president of the foundation, I also want to thank all of the Alliance donors in the audience who have made it possible for us to provide close to $850,000 in training grants this year to support innovative researchers, expert educators, and future academic emergency medicine leaders. Round of applause for that. $850,000. Several of our grant recipients are presenting abstracts this week, and during our networking breakfast this morning, two of our recipients actually talked about their work, and it was emotional, it was full of passion. I wish you were all there to see it, and hopefully you will see that in the future because it's truly impactful, and you need to be able to witness this. As you know, this foundation, the SAEM Foundation, is the largest foundation for academic emergency medicine. And your donations help to support the people with the most promise and the greatest potential to impact emergency medicine over the course of their career. So again, I want to thank you for your continued support to make this possible. And I would actually urge you that if you've not made your donation yet this year and would like to join our esteemed colleagues in supporting the foundation, please make your donation online to SAEM.org and donate. It has been a real privilege to actually serve as the president of the foundation this year, and I want to thank all of you for all that you've done to make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tyndall. Now, it's my great pleasure to present a very special award to a colleague who has been instrumental in strengthening SAEM's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The SAEM Organizational Advancement Award recognizes the tremendous amount of time, effort, and energy that this member has given and continues to give to the organization. Through thoughtful leadership and selfless service, this member has greatly helped to advance academic emergency medicine through education and research, advocacy, and professional development. With this award, we recognize the invaluable contributions that you have made to the society through your leadership. You led the development of an equity and inclusion plan for SAEM and created our first Equity and Inclusion Committee. In addition, your tenure as president of ADIEM, member of the Finance and Nominating Committees, and service on the 2023 Consensus Conference entitled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Developing a Research Agenda for Addressing Racism in Emergency Medicine, has advanced the society in instrumental ways. Through these initiatives, you have empowered SAEM to recognize the great diversity of our members and to enhance our services for all. It is with great honor that I present this award to Dr. Marquita Norman, Associate Professor in the Department of Emergency Medicine at UT Southwestern Medical Center. Dr. Norman, we can't thank you enough for your contributions. And now, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Deb Dierks, Chair of the SAEM Awards Committee, to recognize the first half of this year's award winners.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Mills. There's nothing more fun than actually celebrating the greatness of our specialty, and it's my pleasure to announce the first half of the awards today. So please join us tomorrow as we continue on and celebrate. Our first award we're going to give today is in recognition of actually a new award that was created. It recognizes the emergency medicine department that has shown significant support in diversity, equity, and inclusion through organizational initiatives that address the recruitment, development, and advancements of its physicians promoting equity, diversity, opportunity, and inclusion. The inaugural SAEM Outstanding Department Award for Excellence in Innovation in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is awarded to, drum roll, the Emory University Department of Emergency Medicine. And here to accept is Dr. Wright, Dr. Heron, and Dr. Lowell. The Emory Department of Emergency Medicine has committed to ensuring a climate of inclusion and organizational equity by leveraging the varied attributes of diversity in their community and specialty. Their commitment is amplified by their mission to recruit and develop a diverse group of residents, fellows, and innovative leaders in emergency medicine. Emory has led extensive initiatives focusing on all aspects of emergency medicine diversity, equity, inclusion, including those focused on pathway to medicine, trainee recruitment efforts, faculty recruitment, retention and support efforts, advancement in faculty development, transparency and parity, staffing, APP recruitment, retention, and advancement, health equity and community engagement, and much, much more. Recognized in 2021 as the inaugural winner of the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education Diversity and Inclusion Award, this award is now called the Barbara Ross Lee DO Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award, which celebrates initiatives in which diverse learners are developed, diverse faculties are constructed, and diverse graduate medical education and community embraces differences. Again, SAEM is proud to give the inaugural Outstanding Department Award for Excellence and Innovation in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to Emory. All right, let's continue on. The next one is the John Marks Leadership Award, and our most prestigious academic award. This award celebrates an SAEM member who has made exceptional contributions to emergency medicine through leadership locally and regionally, nationally, or internationally, as well as within our society. The John Marks Leadership Award has been given to pioneers that have shaped the way we approach academic emergency medicine, including the late John Marks himself. Joining me on stage to present this award is John Marks' daughter, Dr. Shelby Marks, currently a PGY2 emergency medicine resident in Greenville, South Carolina. It is my honor to present this year's John Marks Leadership Award to Andy Jagoda at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Over the past 35 years, Dr. Jagoda has served local, national, and international leadership roles that have helped define, strengthen, and promote the specialty of emergency medicine. As chair of emergency medicine from 2009 to 2017, and then again from 2018 to 2020, he led the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai to unprecedented levels of academic and operational excellence. The Mount Sinai Hospital, Elmhurst Hospital, Emergency Medicine Residency Program grew to 25 residents per year, consistently ranking nationally in the top 20 of over 260 emergency medicine programs, and the research division has been ranked in the top 5 in the country in the National Institutes of Health funding. Dr. Jagoda has also been a strong advocate for faculty development and has been an enthusiastic advocate for Mount Sinai Institute for Medical Education, for which he played an instrumental role in the creating of a clinician educator track. He's co-edited 20 books, including the 10th edition of Rosen's Textbook of Emergency Medicine, and in 2021, a new textbook he edited with Chris Landowski on neurologic emergencies was published. Also in 2021, he co-edited a Psychiatric Clinics of North America edition on sports psychiatry. He's authored or co-authored 85 peer-reviewed articles and 62 book chapters. He helped create for the past 20 years and has served as the editor-in-chief of emergency medicine practice. Dr. Jagoda has helped develop emergency medicine training programs internationally in Chile, Italy, and the Netherlands. And in 2009, the government of Singapore invited him to serve as an expert consultant on emergency services and to provide an evaluation and recommendations for their clinical and academic services. He has been a member of SAEM since 1989 and has served on countless committees, task force, and interest groups. He served on the Association of Academic Chairs of Emergency Medicine Executive Committee for several years, and including the president from 2014 to 2015. He received the 2018 Philanthropist of the Year Award from the SAEM Foundation and continues to give back to academic emergency medicine communities through generous contributions. I could spend hours listing the impressive contributions that Dr. Jagoda has made to SAEM and to the specialty, but for now I'll end in saying congratulations, Dr. Jagoda, and thank you for dedicating your career to us. All right, next we have the Excellence in Research Award. This award honors an SAEM member who has made outstanding contributions to emergency medicine through the creation and sharing of new knowledge. The 2023 Excellence in Research Award goes to Carlos Camargo from the Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School. Dr. Carlos Camargo is a professor of emergency medicine at Harvard School of Medicine, professor of epidemiology at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and the Kahn Chair in Emergency Medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital. A prolific researcher, he has maintained continuous federal funding since 1996, contributed greater than 1,200 total publications, and has an H index of 151, and is the first most published author in emergency medicine. He is faculty on multiple NIH training grants and has mentored numerous mentees with significant career trajectories. He's also contributed to training of several hundred additional emergency medicine clinical researchers through the EMNet multi-center projects. Dr. Camargo's contributions in PAC research and mentoring have been recognized by awards including the American College of Emergency Physicians Award for Outstanding Contributions to Research in 2016, the Harvard School of Public Health Innovator Award in 2022, and the HMS Barger Excellence in Mentoring Award in 2011. Congratulations on receiving this year's Excellence in Research Award. The next award honors an SAEM member who has made significant contributions to the advancement of women in academic emergency medicine. The 2023 Advancement of Women in Academic Emergency Medicine Award goes to Tracy Madsen from the Albert Medical School at Brown University School of Public Health. Dr. Madsen is an associate professor of emergency medicine and epidemiology at Brown University, vice chair of research in the Department of Emergency Medicine, and serves as the interim director of the Division of Sex and Gender in Emergency Medicine. Her research focuses on sex and gender-based medicine, acute cerebrovascular disease, stroke epidemiology and prevention, and disparities in the healthcare system, as well as the emergency medicine workforce. She is funded by the NHLBI and has over 100 peer-reviewed publications. She speaks nationally and internationally on topics including stroke in women, health inequities in stroke, and disparities in the academic EM workforce, and is regarded as an expert in the field of sex differences in stroke. She serves as a leader of the Stroke Working Group for the Women's Health Initiative, a landmark longitudinal prospective study of over 160,000 women enrolled over 25 years, many of whom are still being followed. Among other distinctions, she is a fellow of the American Heart Association, an invited leader on multiple American Heart Association national committees, and is currently completing a 2-year fellowship at the National Academy of Medicine, where she is serving on the Healthcare Services Board and the Neuroscience Forum. Congratulations, Dr. Madsen, on receiving this year's award for the advancement of women in academic emergency medicine. Next, we have the Marcus L. Martin Leadership in Diversity and Inclusion Award. This award honors exceptional contributions to emergency medicine through advancing diversity and inclusion. This award recognizes all aspects of diversity and inclusion, spanning the range from human differences such as race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, social class, physical ability or attributes, religious or ethical value systems, national origin, and political beliefs, and ensuring all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, having access to opportunities and resources, and can contribute fully to the organization's success. It is my honor to present this award to Dr. Wendy Macias Constantopoulos from Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School. Dr. Macias is a full-time board-certified emergency physician in the Department of Emergency Medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital. She directs the Center for Social Justice and Health Equity, serves as the Vice Chair for Diversity, Health Equity, and Inclusion, and is the inaugural incumbent of the MGH Endowed Chair for Leadership in Emergency Medicine. She is an accomplished clinician researcher who over the years has provided testimony before the Boston City Council, Massachusetts State House, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and United Nations Global Forum to fight human trafficking in Vienna and on issues of racial inequities, sexual violence, domestic abuse, and human trafficking. In 2017, she was the inaugural recipient of the MGH Department of Emergency Medicine Excellence in Community Engagement Award. Her many efforts to increase department workforce diversity and improve emergency care for diverse patient populations and reduce health disparities across diverse communities led to her promotion as Vice Chair for Diversity, Health Equity, and Inclusion in August of 2021. She's a first-generation Hispanic American of Spanish, Ecuadorian, and indigenous Ecuadorian heritage. Born in Queens, New York, and is recognized by her peers as a testament to the resilience and tenacity of one who knows hard work, chooses a steep climb, and is guided by a higher purpose. Congratulations, Dr. Macias, on receiving this year's award. The remainder of the awards will be announced in a rapid-fire format, which just means I get to talk less. The Public Health Award will go to Herbie Duber from the University of Washington. The Mid-Career Investigators Awards go to Bernard Chang from Columbia University and Daniel Nishijima from UC Davis. The Early Investigator Awards go to Michael Gottlieb from Rush University Medical Center, Elizabeth Samuels from the UCLA Department of Emergency Medicine, and Cynthia Santos from Rutgers, New Jersey's Medical School. Congratulations to all of today's awardees. We look forward to presenting more awards tomorrow at our awards ceremony and keynote address. And now back to Dr. Mills.
Excellent. Congratulations to all our winners. Really, what a wonderful group. So, thank you, Dr. Dierks, and the awards committee for your service. We look forward to honoring more of our incredible colleagues tomorrow. Now, we'd like to take a moment to recognize a few leaders in academic emergency medicine and in the society who have passed away since our last annual meeting, and allow for a moment of silence to reflect on the impact that they have had on all of us personally and professionally, and to remember their accomplishments throughout their careers. Thank you. Well, the time has now come to pass the torch to the next SAEM president. It's been my professional, personal, and deepest honor to have been the SAEM president over the past year. I've endeavored to lead following great examples of many who sit before me as past presidents who know my tremendous debt to them. My thanks to the board of directors and the staff members of SAEM is without parallel. My confidence for our future could not be higher as I introduce you to the next president of SAEM, Dr. Wendy Coates, Professor of Emergency Medicine at UCLA Harvard David Geffen School of Medicine and Senior Faculty Education Specialist at Harbor UCLA Department of Emergency Medicine. She served as Dean of the UCLA Acute Care College and Director of Education at Harbor UCLA, where she founded the Fellowship in Medical Education Scholarship in 1997. She enjoys continued active mentorship of her fellowship graduates and several education researchers across the country. Dr. Coates earned her medical degree from Case Western Reserve University and completed the EM residency at Allegheny General Medical College of Pennsylvania. Dr. Coates' research focus is in medical education with an emphasis on faculty and learner development, mentorship, curricular innovation and evaluation, creativity in medicine, and qualitative methods. She is a proud recipient of research funding from the SAEM Foundation. She received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the CDEM and was elected to the Cord Academy of Scholarship as one of the initial scholars. She has been honored with several education and teaching awards. Dr. Coates is a founding member of the editorial board for AEM Education and Training, member of the AEM editorial board, and is associate editor for the Journal of Dance Medicine and Science. She served as an item writer for the American Board of Emergency Medicine for 9 years. Dr. Coates began her service to SAEM as the resident representative to the Education Committee, which she subsequently chaired for several years. She was the inaugural chair of the Undergraduate Education Committee, where she led the creation and implementation of the SAEM Virtual Advisor Program, and more recently led the initial Fellowship Approval Committee that developed metrics for non-ACGME approved fellowships in emergency medicine. Dr. Coates has also served on the Nominating Committee, Research Committee, and was the SAEM representative to the National Committee on Medical Student Education Reform. She led the creation of the new Armed Med-Ed course for Advanced Education Research Methodology and has been its co-chair. She currently serves as president-elect on the SAEM Board of Directors. Please welcome Dr. Wendy Coates as your new SAEM president.
Thank you, Dr. Mills. Hi, everybody. Welcome to SAEM23, the largest meeting to date for the Society for Academic Emergency Medicine, the best specialty. SAEM is the home for all members of the academic community to come together to focus on our mission that encompasses discovery, education, and professional development for those at all career stages. I congratulate every member who is here presenting an abstract or a didactic. Welcome all who are attending an academy, committee, or interest group meeting, and those of you who are here to enjoy the vibrant academic atmosphere. For the first time, we welcome EmpowerRx, who chose to align their annual meeting with SAEM23. Of course, this meeting would not have been possible without the hours of dedication by each member of our SAEM professional staff, led by our CEO, Megan Shagrin, the program committee, led by Dr. Orion LaFollette, and the SAEM and RAMS boards of directors. I sincerely thank Dr. Angela Mills for her thoughtful and inclusive leadership during this past year, and for her many years of service to SAEM and our members. I also want to thank the leadership of all of our committees, academies, interest groups, as well as the SAEM Foundation and AACEM. I appreciate the ongoing support of my professional career by my family, who has endured the odd schedule of an emergency medicine physician, the screensaver photos containing really graphic images of cool cases for upcoming lectures, late night grant writing sessions, and some very interesting dinner table conversations. Would you guys mind standing up for just a minute? Thank you to my husband, Michael, my daughter, Nancy, and her fiance, Alex, my son, also Alex, and my son, Mark, and his wife, Caitlin. I would not be where I am today without the undying support of my mom and Uncle Ronald, and especially my grandfather, who launched my medical education journey by taking me on house calls starting when I was about 5 years old and hiding nothing. Our community has more than 8,400 members. Many of you first joined us during the COVID pandemic when we sought to provide a network and supporting you in the academic mission. And we united in navigating uncharted waters at that time. We will continue to confront new challenges and create new opportunities as a community. You know, there's something for everyone at SAEM. The 8 academies provide a venue for members who share focused career goals, and they set a strategic plan to advance their areas. All academies are free to join as part of your SAEM membership. Hundreds of members volunteer to serve on the 20 committees and work tirelessly to accomplish objectives to attain SAEM's strategic plan, and that benefits all members. Our 29 interest groups enable members with a common area of interest to share their ideas as a community with the support of SAEM staff. We're here for you in the virtual world as well, providing education, information, and networking opportunities. In fact, we have already hosted 24 webinars in 2023. We provide a variety of FOMED resources, and we're anxious to connect with you on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We're in a time of great collaboration with many other organizations. Our members have represented SAEM on the All-EM Workforce Task Force, the All-EM DEI Task Force, the ACGME, to convey our commitment to rigorous and scholarly standards for all EM residency programs, and most recently, to the new EM Match Task Force, where as a specialty, we will work to address all of the aspects for the future of our workforce. SAEM's origin story underscores the idea that people who are from different backgrounds and share similar goals form a stronger union. In 1989, leaders of UAIM and STEM united to form SAEM. I proudly served as one of the first ever resident members on an SAEM committee that year and have held multiple roles in the society ever since. I'm greatly honored for these 34 years of service to culminate in the role as your president this year. SAEM is an organization that values diversity of all types: career focus, country of practice, race, ethnicity, gender, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, age, religion, ability, beliefs, socioeconomic status, veterans, immigrants, and other marginalized community. Together, we will be stronger for decades to come. Well, now I would like to shift to reporting on how SAEM is striving to attain excellence across all areas of our mission. Emergency care research, career development support, and opportunities for federal funding are essential. The highly successful NHLBI K-12 program enabled 3/4 of its scholars to subsequently secure individual funding. Well, this demonstrates that researchers in our specialty are a worthwhile investment. In the summer, we visited the Office of Emergency Care Research and NINDS in Bethesda and had a very productive meeting to set a collaborative agenda to train and support our members in the NIH funding process. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we met with NIAID leaders to explore opportunities that align with both of our missions. In the year to come, we plan to strengthen and expand our connections with the NIH to support our members and their careers. SAEM's 2 journals provide a venue for dissemination of our research. Under the leadership of Dr. Jeff Klein, AEM now has an impact factor of 5.221. Its sister journal, Academic Emergency Medicine Education and Training, whose editor-in-chief is Susan Promise, is now indexed in PubMed Central and will receive its first impact factor in June. We expect this to be about 1.7, which is actually really impressive for a first impact factor, and that'll place the journal in about the 50th percentile in its category. AEM had over 150,000 article downloads in 2022, and the articles were cited over 700 times. These accomplishments for both journals could not have occurred without the strong leadership of both editorial boards and the thoughtful reviews that many of you provided here in the audience today. Okay, you are currently experiencing our biggest educational offering of the year. At the SAEM headquarters back in Chicago, there's a new state-of-the-art educational space to bring learners together with experienced mentors to lay the foundation for the future of academic emergency medicine. We offer courses now that support the professional development of our members, whether it is to become a stronger researcher in armed or armed med ed, a more effective leader in the chair development program, E-LEAD or CAEME courses, or to enhance the teaching skills in the brand new Master Educator course. One of the most important things that I would like to reflect upon is that nobody gets where we are today alone. The science of mentorship has been a cornerstone of my career, so I ask for your indulgence to recall its origin story. Like all working parents, when Odysseus left for the Trojan War in the 12th century BCE, he had to find childcare. So he entrusted his friend Mentor to look after his son Telemachus. About 700 years later, the most famous of mentoring hierarchies was born when Socrates mentored Plato, who then created the first world-class university near Athens. His star protege, Aristotle, later mentored Alexander the Great. Now, many generations later, mentorship lives on and is the key to our success. Hang on 1 second. So, here we go. I invited Drs. Wilkerson and Hochberger to share the podium as I begin my leadership journey, because without them, I would not be standing here myself. Bob took a chance on a graduate from Marcus Martin's residency program and offered me a faculty spot in 1992 at Harbor UCLA as the director of education. Well, I thought I might stay for about 5 years, but as many of you know, when you get a boss like Bob, staying more than 2 decades is actually pretty standard. He set the expectation that each of the faculty would achieve excellence in their chosen area. Then he backed us up by doing whatever he could to make it possible to succeed. While wanting to progress within the leadership in the UCLA Dean's Office, Bob suggested I find someone who knew more about that world. Luann, then the Senior Associate Dean of Education at UCLA, invited me to lunch to learn about my career aspirations. And then, over the next 15 years, systematically put into place a series of learning and leadership opportunities where I could become a member of her vibrant network of education researchers, visionaries, and educational leaders, all with her undying support and mentorship. In today's language, these mentors embodied the principles of sponsorship and the best side benefit of dear friendship. So what Bob, Luann, Gloria, and Marcus did for me laid the groundwork for a rich network that I know will continue to evolve, especially within emergency medicine, but it's far-reaching beyond as well. So I'm going to ask for your indulgence, and I would like to demonstrate visually the impact of networks. So this is the audience participation portion of the presidential address. So please indulge me as a visual learner. Let's start like this. If you see yourself as my mentor, my mentee, colleague, collaborator, co-author, co-committee member, medical student, resident, friend, member of any of the courses we've been in together, and this is at any time during your career, I invite you to stand up and remain standing for a few minutes. Now, I would like you to consider Drs. Wilkerson, Hochberger, Kuhn, and Martin. And maybe a few of you will even have connections to the ballet world. If your career has been touched by any of these individuals in any way, I invite you to stand right now. Finally, for anyone still seated, and the rest of you have to keep standing. I see some people who are trying to sneak to sit down. I would like you to look around the room, and maybe those of you in the front can turn around so people can see who you are. And what I would like you to do right now is, if you have been influenced by any of these people in any way whatsoever, I would like you to stand as well. Look around for just a moment before you take your seat. This is what SAEM is all about. Emergency medicine is our family. We look out for each other, and we have intertwining networks. And now you're allowed to sit down. Now more than ever, we need to ensure a robust pipeline for our future. It is in your hands. Reach out to others and bring people together. Be a mentor. Accept mentorship. Create your legacy so that the future world of emergency medicine is a better place because of you. As an organization, we are actively developing our successors. RAMS develops new leaders with authentic and mentored leadership opportunities. RAMS members sit at the same table with experts in all areas of emergency medicine, which is an organic way to develop a career network in any subspecialty niche. This ensures their voice is heard. Next year, RAMS is launching a new program of regional ambassadors to all EM interest groups to bring the educational and networking opportunities to students right where they are. Let's do what we can together to lay the groundwork for a great EM match in 2024. You are the best ambassadors for our specialty. We are the folks who are there for our patients and society. Anyone, anything, anytime. Please be mindful of what you say. Prospective residents are always listening. Give pre-med and preclinical medical students opportunities to work with you on research and educational products. Our foundation provides career development grants and funds the future of emergency care research. Won't you please join me in supporting our future by donating to the SAEM Foundation? SAEM is shaping the future of science, education, and the practice of emergency medicine, and I am honored to be your president this year. Thank you for entrusting me for this incredible opportunity and responsibility. I am looking forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Congratulations, Dr. Coates. We very much look forward to your leadership and your guidance this year. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our Dr. Peter Rosen Memorial Keynote Address speaker, Dr. Jane Scott. Jane Scott, renowned and respected for her work as a leader in emergency medicine research, funding, and training, will present the SAEM23 Dr. Peter Rosen Memorial Keynote Address entitled Advancing Emergency Care Research, Reflecting on Our Past, Looking to Our Future. Dr. Scott began her career in the emergency care setting as a staff nurse at the Duke University Emergency Department and then as a nurse practitioner at the Johns Hopkins Adult Emergency Department. She presented her first research abstract in 1981 at the University Association of Emergency Medicine meeting and was followed by numerous emergency care publications. After obtaining a doctorate from Hopkins School of Public Health, Dr. Scott joined the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality as a program officer, providing oversight to federally funded pre-hospital and ED studies. In 1995, she joined the University of Maryland National Study Center for Trauma and EMS, followed by serving as research director of the program at Shock Trauma. In 2005, Dr. Scott joined the National Institutes of Health as director of the Office of Research Training and Career Development in the Division of Cardiovascular Sciences and the NHLBI. In 2008, she created the K-12 program in emergency care research, which she managed until her retirement, working extensively with the emergency medicine researchers at 8 training programs, having trained over 50 K-12 scholars. Dr. Scott has served on the SAEM Research Committee, ASAP SAEM Federal Research Funding Work Group, and is faculty at the EMF SAEM Foundation Grantee Workshop over 8 years. She's educated and mentored countless SAEM members on their K-12 programs, presented at numerous SAEM annual meetings, worked closely with program officers on NIH-related matters, and taught many of our investigators how to become independently funded. In the first 5 minutes, she tried to mentor me on research that we met. Please welcome Dr. Scott.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the honor of this this award. I didn't meet Dr. Rosen, but I'm thrilled to have the award. Let me get started. And here we go. So what I'm going to do is reflect a little bit on my background and my history, and then we're going to go forward and talk about the K-12 program and what we tried to do in order to create NIH investigators out of the trainees. Okay, no conflicts of interest. And I have to start with this. I learned first about defibrillators over the dinner table one night in the 60s. My dad was starting to talk about these great new devices that were being tested in Bellevue Hospital in New York. And he said it was exciting because there was now something in addition to the precordial thump. Always have to do that. So he was excited with the notion of defibrillators. Bellevue in '68. This is just my background. We've gone over that. When I went to AHCPR, let's get away from I went to the federal agency that funded health services research in 1989. At that point, somebody was leaving. I was walking in, and they sort of went, oh, doctorally prepared, ER nurse practitioner, boom. I was given all the pre-hospital ED and ICU studies, which was fabulous. And at that time, the focus of the research was on out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, pre-hospital EMS configuration, early grants on recognition of acute cardiac ischemia, and it was wonderful. This was also my first introduction. Can I have a sip of your water? My first introduction to large organized research centers. I got to go out and see and meet the Seattle King County EMS group, led by Mickey Eisenberg and Richard Cummings and many others. But it was a wonderful, robust environment where I learned about their data collection system, the pre-hospital system, and learned about their research. So I was really gifted with that opportunity. And I also wanted to mention, way back then, I met two early career investigators, including Dr. Tom Aufderheide and Art Kellerman. So we go back a long way. So the Health Services Agency is running along. We get to the mid-1990s, and healthcare expenditures rose dramatically. So Congress got involved. The agency was expanded. It was given the new agenda of medical effectiveness research, which is basically what works, what doesn't work, and where are the areas of clinical uncertainty. And we were to go after those projects. There were 12 large research programs that were funded, and it was quite interesting. It was a great program. With the program, it was also the very first time Medicare data was given out to researchers around the country to conduct research. It was ground zero for Medicare data. Separately, there was a group that was doing, it was to review the research findings and to come up with clinical practice recommendations for early management of the various conditions. That led to a couple of big problems. One is that there was one particular group of providers who didn't like what we were doing and they decided that they wanted us to end as an institute or as an agency. So there were great big battles on Capitol Hill. There was congressional wrangling. The Health Service Agency's budget was cut by 80%, which meant there goes your pre-hospital ER and ICU research. Also at that time, in '97, we had exemption from informed consent adopted. It was rolled out in an odd way. I know from where I was, there was every single study that was up and running stopped, waiting for the guidance as to how to proceed. We were waiting for guidance on what constituted community consent, and did our IRB committees understand what that was? So, when I went to shock trauma, I had, at the University of Maryland, I was the first study center, it was interesting, but then when I got to trauma, I was responsible for the fellow training, and I was also responsible for identifying and finding and writing grants for shock trauma grants. So it was clinical research programs, clinical research grants related to resuscitation, fluid resuscitation, new endeavors such as fibrin clot bandages, and a whole host of early therapeutics. Okay. Yeah, the one point here is we still could get IRB approval on EFIC studies when I was at shock trauma. We had a number of instances where we had studies that we were invited to join where everything was up and running. I had the neurosurgeon with me, and we were trying to get a study accepted for recruiting geriatric trauma patients, and to make a long story short, nothing. It expired. We couldn't get approval, and we had to turn down that opportunity. Okay, so this is just me. The whole fact that I got to NHLBI was sort of a circuitous way. I was frustrated. When I arrived to NHLBI, I was frustrated in the apparent lack of interest in emergency care research and the lack of funding. So, and I really believed it was an area that needed to be enhanced. So, I joined in 2005. The individual I led a group that had 1,200 research training grants. So institutional grants, individual grants, fellowship grants. And within that, I want to focus today on T32 programs, which are postdoctoral research training programs, and many clinicians enter at the fellowship stage. They get into a T32 program that is funded, and they go for 2 or 3 years, and it's a wonderful mechanism. NIH funds roughly 2,200 of these programs every single year. In our division, there were roughly, for cardiovascular sciences, roughly 140, 150 programs overall, of which, let's say there were 30 to 40 programs in cardiology that was teaching clinical cardiology research, how to conduct research. And some programs, if you looked back in the records, they go back as far as the late 1980s. So every so often when I hear, we're behind, we're not this, we're not that, you haven't been funded for 40 years. That's what part of this whole effort is to get you funded so that you do have the capacity to grow the field. That is exactly what we're doing right now. So, no guilt. You guys weren't even board certified. There was no, you were a thought. And if I looked at organizational charts back then, I'm just sort of amazed. You actually persevered in getting your specialty and creating a new box on a School of Medicine chart, which is incredibly difficult. Schools of medicine are loath to change their organizational chart, but you guys did, so kudos to you. Now we get to research. So I looked at our portfolio in 2005, and there were no programs in emergency care research at Heart, Lung, and Blood. That doesn't mean that there weren't any across NIH, but let me throw that on you, sorry. It's been a long morning. So, but in 2005, there were absolutely no programs, no T32 programs related to emergency care research, none. And starting that year, the year after, I started coming to SAEM and speaking about T32 programs. And I think a couple of the guys, I think Jeff may have remembered this, and I would talk about T32, nobody would show up. So here I am. Again, you can't get rid of me. So it's really important to understand this. In order to make a competitive NIH research investigator takes 7 to 8 years, period. Doesn't take any less. There are no miracles that go through 2 years and are automatically NIH competitive. You're not. So if you take, one of the recommendations is that you guys start looking into T32 programs so that you can get, let's say, your clinical research or your clinical research fellowships funded related to, and you get the stipend, you get the tuition, you get all sorts of monies that help educate your programs or help you with your training. So for clinicians, scientists, many enter research through their postdoc fellowship. It's only 2 or 3 years of training. I recommend 3. Other people argue with me and say 2. But you can't, the problem is, if you get out at 2 years, and even if you go fully 3 years, you need to know you still have 5 years of training to get. And how are you going to do that? How are you going to find that? So we encourage, so what they do is they pursue individual K awards, and then they start applying for research awards. So it's a long, long trek for the people who are in fellowships. They need to be linked up and make the jump over to a K award so that they can be funded for 5 years at 75% and can pursue their science. So this is where ACEP and SAEM come in. They went to NIH, to the director in 2005 and said, we would like some money. We would like some money for research and for research training. So NHLBI was already, oh good, great. Okay, so we created the K-12 programs to meet research workforce deficiencies, and let me go here. Scientific focus of the K-12 program. We created the program. We thought acute heart, lung, blood diseases, injuries, research should start in the ED or the pre-hospital setting, and it must be novel, it must be new, it must be innovative. And the scientific write-up is still in an RFA that's available. The focus of the program, basically, we didn't want to duplicate 2/3 of NIH's studies are bench science. We went for the clinical science. We wanted focused programs that they knew what their areas of expertise were, and they were going to train fellows in those areas. And we focused on the initial time, what's unique about emergency medicine over everybody else under the sun. It's the initial time frame when you guys meet newly arriving patients at the front door and the ones who appear to be critically ill. And you always ask, what do we have? What do we do? What will we do? And frequently there is uncertainty in those decision making. There may not be enough information, may not be diagnostic tools, there may not be a lot of things in that space. And so that's where the focus of this program was. Okay, I'm going to skip this. Basically, the program had 2 principal investigators. We had annual meetings for the scholars. Each site, I'm going to get to the program in a second, each site had specific strengths, 2 to 3 years per trainee. One of their mentors had to be NIH funded. You needed somebody with research background. This is just, I talked about site-specific research program. I pulled out one of the first grants, and they had 4 areas because people would ask me, what do you want? What? And so this grant had heart failure, arrhythmia, asthma, and acute lung injury, and then built the program around that. The scientific program was there, and they had the PIs and everything. All right. So, markers of success in academic medicine, generally speaking, abstract papers, presentations. Great. For this program, we knew that nobody was getting anywhere until they made the jump to the K. So I made it my mission, and I badgered the principal investigators unmercifully on that it's not enough to get the kids through the program. They've got to get them into the next award. What are you going to do to get them into the next award? So creating the program, running the program, getting them through the program means nothing if you don't convert them to the next level of research training. So with the first program we ended up with a total of 43 trainees, of which a total of 74%, about 36 people, went from K-12 program into K awards or R awards. That means that these people are within 2 or 3 years of being fully funded NIH investigators. So it's a large bolus of individuals that will be or is being injected into your universe. And there are 2 articles that came out in the last couple of years. So moving forward, I think 2 points. There's always discussion about where do we go for research funding. I will be 1 more minute. In cardiology, in cardiology, research relates to the heart. And there are topical areas, there are then research areas, and research invariably is bench, translational, clinical, population science, etc. But it maps out nicely. And in cardiology, it's very easy to map out the whole of the research domain in which they operate, for the most part. For emergency medicine, do you have a single thing that pulls everybody together? I would say no, and I think then there are infinite number of research topics that you can do and will do. So where does that leave you guys? You are now funded by multiple institutes. This is a huge change in the last decade. NINDS, child health, mental health, and general medical sciences. So you're growing, and you're growing fast. And my point is that you're growing at multiple institutes, but you also need to grow in terms of research training for fellows. And so you need to think about the research training stepladder, as it were. I'm going to skip this one. Thank you to the scholars and everybody else. This is this first program, 4th year. And let me also mention the stars of the program. These are the principal investigators who were the first go-around leaders. Lynn Richardson, Lance Becker, Don Yealy, Alan Storo, Craig Newgart, and Nate Cooperman. And they ran programs for 5 years, and it was very good, as you know. Finally, we had a second program, and this is where we picked up Dr. Klein and Dr. Newmar as additional investigators, and 2 programs continued on for 5 years. And with that said, I've been badgering everybody who had K-12 program that they should be coming in for a T32 program. And I'm really happy to say that Lynn Richardson and Cliff Calloway, Don Yilley at Pittsburgh have competed and received T32 funding. And then I have to mention Mike Danino, who is at Beth Israel, Boston, Harvard. He came in on his own and he just got a grant. So he's emergency medicine. I never met him. I'm giving him credit though. Okay, so that's it. It was a large, complex program. It's a matter of getting the kids to the different levels, and that's the key. So, all right. I didn't know how much time I would have because we started so late, so my apologies.
Thank you again. All right. So I would now like to invite Dr. Jeff Klein, AEM Editor-in-Chief, to the stage to join me in introducing the second half of the program, the plenary abstracts.
Thank you, Dr. LaFollette. It is my pleasure and honor to kick off SAEM23 with the presentations of the best original research this year. As always, each abstract underwent an objective, rigorous, and independent peer review process. And today we'll hear from the top 8 out of 1,000 submissions. We'll hear about the first half today, and tomorrow Dr. Esther Chen will introduce and moderate the second half. So with that, I would like to invite our first presenter, entitled Erector Spinal Plane Block for Low Back Pain, Reduces Pain, and May Reduce Opioid Consumption, presented by Dr. Andrew M. Wayment from Southwest Healthcare.
Good morning, Austin. It is a pleasure to be here this morning, a great honor. Today, let's talk about some back pain. I have no financial disclosures, although I am looking for some, so please let me know. All right, folks, today let's talk about something near and dear to all of our hearts as emergency medicine physicians. Now, why do I bring this up today? It's actually something we treat a lot. Over 2.5 million visits per year can be attributed to low back pain in the emergency department. Now, although this may not be diagnostically something difficult to figure out, it is hard to treat. And what do we usually treat it with? Well, up to 20% of our patients will be treated with opiates in the emergency department. Another 20% will be prescribed long-term opiates for low back pain. Now, why do I bring this up? The NIH produced this graph recently looking at a 20-year period of unintentional overdoses related to medications. As you might guess, this line in blue is fentanyl. We absolutely are in a crisis right now. Now, by no means am I saying that emergency medicine physicians are to blame for this graph. No, rather, I believe we are in a unique situation, a unique position in the emergency department to influence this population. It is up to us to develop alternative and sustainable methods for treating pain, in this case, low back pain. I would like to introduce to you the Erector Spinal Plane Block. This block was first described in 2016, and it's mostly seen in the anesthesia literature, usually for neuropathic pain on the thoracic spine or in the chest cavity itself. In more recent studies, we've looked at the Erector Spinal Plane Block for renal colic, pancreatitis, and even back pain treatment. Let's look at the anatomy here. It is hypothesized that the dorsal root of the spine innervates the soft tissue of the back. We see here our spinous process that is posterior. We see here laterally out of the spinal cord, the spinal root, which branches into the ventral and the dorsal ramus. It is the dorsal ramus that passes by the transverse process, and it is the rector spinae muscle, which is posterior to that. It is in this plane, this fascial plane, that we are injecting anesthesia in order to numb the back. We can see that there is a multidermatomal spread of medication in this area that may relate to less back pain. It was here that we decided to ask the question, is the Erector spinae plane block feasible? Can we do it in the emergency department? And that brings us to our study. We conducted a feasibility study. We wanted to see if this would work. We collected a convenient sample that was grouped into our treatment and our control groups. We'll talk about that. And we did this at three community emergency medicine sites over a course of 1 year. What were our outcomes? Primarily, we were looking at pain reduction of the Erector spinae block when compared to standard therapy. Secondarily, we looked at opiate use in the Erector spinae group compared to standard therapy. Our inclusion criteria: those 18 years old and presenting with atraumatic acute low back pain, they could not be pregnant, could not have red flag symptoms such as fever, injection drug use, saddle anesthesia, etc. And patients could not be admitted to the hospital. Our MDs were trained in standardized training sessions. We had both residents and faculty performing the block. In our treatment arm, we had 31 patients, and we used weight-based dosing of 0.25% bupivacaine that was then advanced into the back at the transverse process. The area itself was around the L2, L3 area. In our control arm, we had 26 patients who received standard therapy. Standard therapy was left up to the MD who was enrolling. That could include Toradol, lidocaine patches, benzos, a couple perky snacks, whatever you may use. Let's move on to our results. We performed a standard t-test to evaluate the mean pain scores in our patients over time. On the y-axis, we see pain scores. On the x-axis, we see time. Now, patients did have a baseline pain. We do believe this is related to folks with their chronic pain coming in. Patients had their acute pain crisis by presenting in the emergency department. So we see at ED pain at 0 hours, patients coming in with almost 10 out of 10 back pain. So absolutely an acute pain crisis. After our block, we did see statistical significance in reduction of pain when compared to the non-block. We can see there that our confidence intervals relate as such. So at 1 hour and at day 2, we did have significant pain reduction with the block. This was not significant in our 7-day and our 14-day period. Looking at it from a more granular standpoint, we can see here our statistical significant numbers here with pain reduction. At 1 week and 2 week, there was not statistical significance. However, it is important to report that this block did provide pain relief for up to 2 weeks. We believe that this block gets people through their pain crisis and allowing them to do alternative methods, such as mobilize themselves, get off the couch, start moving, and have less back pain overall. We believe this intrinsically relates to our next set of results. We looked at the proportion of opiate use in our block group compared to the non-block group. On the y-axis, we see percentage of opiate use, and on the x-axis, time. Patients were taking opiates at baseline. Not surprising, right? We do believe that patients would maybe see a primary care physician, they had some left over. People were trying to get through their pain crisis, and then they presented to us in the emergency department. We can see here that there is a decrease in the amount of opiate use in the block group when compared to the non-block group, and this was statistically significant as well. We had a 64% reduction of opiate use in those who received the block. And here's our p-value. We did not have any complications. Limitations to the study. We did have a bupivacaine shortage. We did have an RN shortage. And when we started using this block in the lower spine, we realized, wow, a lot of our fluffy patients here, we can't really see the spine. So this was kind of a technical issue that we adapted to, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Now, how does one ESPB? Let's take a quick view. This is a sagittal view of the thoracic spine, and we see there in the black the transverse process. And historically, we would use an in-plane technique, where the needle is advanced underneath the probe towards the transverse process. We do this often in the neck, for example, because we are trying to visualize the structures and not injure anything. This is a beautiful image. We can see everything. However, this is the thoracic spine. Let me highlight to you, this is the lumbar spine using a linear probe. Off the left side of the screen, we should be seeing a needle. Does anybody see that needle? Nope. We do see some hydrodissecting here as well. The point is, we are not able to see this needle. It is tough to see that we're in the plane, and therefore we needed to adapt to this. What kind of block will we use for that? Well, let me introduce it to you. Whoop, there it is. The way out of plane block. We developed this block as a means to directly hit the transverse process. We advance the needle perpendicular to the probe, we hit the transverse process, and then we inject our medication. I'd like to show you a video that we filmed with core ultrasound. Like I mentioned, L4, L5, we identify, we move superiorly to the L2, L3 region. Here we are going to identify the spinous process, as seen there. By the way, this was a sterile procedure. And we are moving laterally to visualize the transverse process. It is here that we then advance our needle perpendicular to the probe. We hit the transverse process, you pull up, and you inject approximately 30 cc's of fluid. This is us filming Dr. Avila and a poor resident here. I'd like to thank my team, Dr. Macias, Dr. Avila, Dr. Ito, and Dr. Steele. Lastly, folks, I truly believe that this is a procedure that all emergency physicians, regardless of age and comfortability of the ultrasound, can do in the emergency department. If you have a moment, you're welcome to take a picture of this and view these results with core ultrasound. Any questions? Thank you.
This abstract's now open for questions. As always, if you have a question, please come to one of the paired microphones. Introduce yourself and your affiliation.
Oh, yeah, please. That's what I wanted to hear. Ooh, we got a question.
Hi. Is it on?
Hello there.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Nancy Onisco. I'm from UT Southwestern in Dallas. You said you use 0.25% bupivacaine. I'm just wondering, have you thought about using it with epinephrine versus without? I mean, perhaps it could last
To use a
longer.
larger amount?
Pardon me?
In order to use a larger amount of fluid then?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So we found that after a certain amount of injection of cc's, so over 30 cc's was actually quite uncomfortable for patients. That is a large amount of fluid in the lower spine. And definitely that area can take that amount of fluid, but we felt that 30 cc's was kind of our magic number for giving a decent amount of medication itself in milligrams, as well as a select volume. Great question.
Hi, I have a quick question, not related to the procedure, but related to sort of feasibility.
Sure.
Did you collect length of stay data for these patients in the two groups and/or bounce back rates?
As far as the emergency department rates?
Correct.
Or its length of stay? We did not in this study. That's definitely been done in the case series that has been done before our study. So we did not look at that. Recidivism is definitely a huge problem with this population, and that's why we started the study. We did look at that, and we looked at. The problem was we didn't necessarily collect what they were coming back for. We did have some people come to the emergency department. However, more chart data is needed to kind of assess that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. I think there's one more.
Hi, I'm Addie Malik. I'm University of Kansas City. How did you determine the absolute highest level of vertebrae that you were going to perform this block at, or did you always do it at the same level?
Oh, absolutely. So definitely where the patient was having pain was factored into that. So if it was maybe a tiny bit higher than, up to L1, L2 was kind of the highest we would do. And then if it's a tiny bit lower where that pain is, we would do it there. The great thing about this block is this medication, once it's in the fascial plane, will transect caudally, cranially and caudally, as well as onto the other side. So if they have right-sided pain, we'd often see the anesthesia take effect on the left side as well. So almost one injection just needed to provide the pain relief.
And kind of a follow-up to that, did you ever find that you were getting migration of your anesthesia higher than 3 vertebral levels up?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes even 5 to 7 levels up. Yeah, so this is definitely a multi-dermatomal block of the anterior, posterior, lateral, thorax, and abdomen. It's pretty cool stuff. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Was it effective for us?
So for the sake of time, move on to our next plenary, which is Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act Citations for Failure to Accept Appropriate Transfer 2011 to 2022, presented by Jasmine Randawa from LA County USC Medical Center.
All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Jasmine. I just graduated from medical school this Saturday, so still getting, thank you. Still getting used to calling myself Dr. Randawa, but I'm excited to be starting residency at LA General Medical Center, the new name for LA County USC, in just one short month. And today we will be discussing the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act citation events for failure to accept an appropriate transfer between the years of 2011 and 2022. Our research was supported by an R01 from the AHRQ and an NIH grant at USC. So as EM physicians, we interface with EMTALA on a daily basis. EMTALA is a federal statute first enacted in 1986 to ensure that all patients with medical emergencies would be able to get the care that they needed regardless of their ability to pay, and to make sure that they wouldn't be dumped on another hospital's doorsteps. Now, EMTALA does cover many facets of emergency treatment. The section of the law that we are all most familiar with are the rights granted at the primary ED where the patient first presents. An ED's responsibility to a patient who presents to them includes an appropriate medical screening exam and also stabilizing measures for that patient. If the patient requires a level of care that is not available at that ED, so for example, your patient has an aortic dissection and your hospital doesn't have a vascular surgeon, it is that facility's responsibility to transfer that patient after stabilization to another facility that has those services available. Now, EMTALA regulations do not just apply to that original presenting ED, but also apply to the hospital receiving the transfer, which I will call the recipient hospital today. And this is the section of the law that we are focusing on. So under EMTALA, hospitals cannot refuse the incoming transfer of an ED patient that requires their specialized services to stabilize their emergency if the hospital has both the capacity, so the beds or the ICU nurses, and the capability, so the credentialed subspecialist required in order to treat that patient. And this requirement applies to all ED patients that are in active labor or those that have a medical or psychiatric emergency. So what happens if the transfer request was appropriate, but it was denied or there was a significant delay in transfer of care? If this happens, that recipient hospital can receive an EMTALA citation. Now, in order for a facility to receive an EMTALA citation, a concerned party must first contact the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, who will authorize the states to investigate the incident at the facility. Oops. State investigators will then conduct interviews and review call logs and also patient charts to assess for any violations, and then they'll compile an inspection text that goes back to CMS. And if a violation has been determined by CMS, the hospital may have up to 90 days to correct the underlying problems, or they will risk having their Medicare agreement terminated. To date, we don't have information on why certain facilities are actually denying these transfer requests. And so that is our goal, to systematically describe the citation events that involve the failure to accept a medically appropriate transfer. To do this, we put in a Freedom of Information Act request to CMS, and we received all inspection texts for the EMTALA citations that occurred between January of 2011 and September of 2022. We're still working on that last quarter of 2022. CMS has already pre-coded the data depending on which violation they had determined, and they use this internal code of 2411 called recipient hospital responsibilities to denote those that were for a failure to accept transfer, so we just isolated those requests. We then systematically extracted further characteristics and data from the inspection text, and then we recorded that data into a REDCap database. So overall, in 11 years, there were 2,694 EMTALA citation events, and that is the number for all of the events, not just those for a failure to accept a transfer. And of those, about 8% involved a failure to accept a transfer. Now, during their investigation, the state investigator would also review additional patient charts to see if there were any systematic issues in denying an appropriate transfer. And if additional patients were found, they were summed in one citation event. And we found that about 20% of citation events actually involved failure to accept multiple transfers. And that range was from between 2 to 20 patients. Overall, 19 hospitals were cited for failure to accept a transfer on multiple occasions, meaning multiple different investigations, and 2 hospitals even had 3 separate citation events for failure to accept a transfer. Now, of the 207 citation events, approximately half of patients needed a surgical service, 1/3 of patients needed a psychiatric service, and 14% required medical services, including ICU care, and 6% required an obstetric service. In a majority of cases, a specific reason for refusal was not documented in the citation report, but for those that did document a reason, the most common reason was insurance status, followed by geographic location, so patient was in a different county, state, or even the US Virgin Islands, and then lastly, age if the facility did not want to take a minor. Now, while the majority of these citation events happened at short-term hospitals, only 10% or so of their citation events involved the failure to accept a transfer. In psych hospitals, a disproportionate 36% of their citation events involved the failure to accept a transfer. There were some limitations to our study. First, the outcomes and the characteristics for some of the citations were not clearly described in the inspection text, so we don't exactly know why those patients were turned away. Second, we also only have data on the violations that ended up being reported to CMS, so it is pretty impossible to estimate just how many violations occur but then are not reported to CMS. So today, our findings show that half of EMTALA citation events for failing to accept an appropriate transfer involved a refusal for a surgical emergency, and 1/3 involved patients with psychiatric emergencies. The data suggests that surgeons, psychiatrists, and staff at psychiatric facilities would benefit from continued education regarding their EMTALA requirements. For example, in the reports that I had read, multiple surgeons had remarked on how little EMTALA training they had, and oftentimes they said that they didn't even know they were responsible for patients in other states if they had come to them. In addition, numerous hospitals were cited on multiple occasions. Our group's prior work has shown that 99% of citations are resolved with corrective actions, with less than 1% involving termination of a Medicare agreement. In addition, only a small percentage of the EMTALA citations result in a monetary penalty, and our group's prior work has also shown that these penalties have been decreasing over time. So to me, this suggests that our current penalty structure may not be enough of a deterrent to prevent repeat transfer violations. Finally, my last conclusion is a little bit more uplifting. Knowledge of EMTALA law and enforcement policies can facilitate patient advocacy. While conducting this research, I personally read through over half of the inspection texts, and oftentimes those included a call log of the ED physician discussing the patient with the transfer center or the physician at the recipient hospital. And there were numerous instances where the ED physician was advocating hard for their patient and mentioned specifically that not accepting the patient was an EMTALA violation. Though the cases I was reading did ultimately lead to a violation, I can only imagine how many patients have received the transfer care that they needed because of our fierce advocacy. So as a new trainee, this is very inspiring to me. So thank you. All right, any questions?
Ed Michelson, Texas Tech, El Paso. First, congratulations.
Thank you.
And good luck with your residency. Did you look at the type of facilities in terms of for-profit, not-for-profit, public, private, that caused these EMTALA violations?
You know, that is an excellent question. Not specifically in this abstract, although we are writing a full paper with more details about all of this data. So that is something that we could definitely consider for a sub-analysis. I would also be very interested to see that.
Thank you. I'll look forward to reading it.
Rich Wolf, Boston. Did you break down who the whistleblowers were, versus family versus referring institution? And secondly, was there any sort of geographic pattern that emerged here, that there are certain parts of the country where calling this out is common?
Yeah, so I couldn't hear the first part of what you said. Sorry, I have a slight cold.
Oh, sorry. I was curious to know who actually was the whistleblower, if that's marked on the thing. Were they more referring institutions who were getting frustrated at getting blocked, or was it more the patient or their family?
So I don't have specific data on that. It seemed like more often than not, it was actually like a physician in the emergency department, though friends and family can report to CMS if they do find a violation has occurred. And then in terms of geographic variability, there is actually a good amount of variability by region. I do have a hidden slide that I had prepared just in case. So if we could show that slide, I can show you a little map of the variability because I find it quite interesting.
Maybe not.
I know we have it, so hopefully we can show it, but there were certain regions that had a significantly higher percentage of these citations, which I find fascinating because they're not the ones that you would necessarily expect. So for example, a lot of, oh, you can see it right now actually. So I would expect areas such as like the region including New York, because of the density of hospitals, to have a way higher percentage of the citations. But actually you find that more it's like the regions in the South, and also the one including Texas that has a higher percentage. So I just found that interesting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wendawa. AV, if it's possible, could we turn on the mics up here on the bank so that we don't keep stumbling over the presenters? Our third presentation is entitled Emergency Medicine Workforce Attrition, Differences by Age and Gender, presented by Dr. Cameron Gettle. Okay, here he is, from Yale University. Sorry, Cameron, I didn't see you.
All right, thank you all. I have some sobering findings to present today. I'd like to thank SAEM for selecting this work as a plenary, as well as my collaborators listed on the slide. We have a few disclosures listed, our funding, and some team members are leadership within SAEM, workforce committees, agenda, SAEM, AGEM, et cetera. By way of background, the emergency medicine workforce has garnered a lot of attention recently, with annual attrition estimates ranging between 1% and 10%. As we all know, there are many macro forces at play: corporatization and private equity, insertion within emergency medicine more recently, non-physician providers' role within emergency medicine as well. And there's been the projected surplus of emergency medicine physicians by 2030, with a potential underestimation of attrition in work that we've shown previously, as well as attrition during COVID, not fully taken into account, but also having shown elevated levels. Female emergency medicine physicians comprise an increasing proportion of the emergency medicine workforce over the last few decades. 40% of EM residents are female, 29% of active emergency medicine physicians are, yet only 11% of emergency medicine department chairs are female, evidence of the leaky pipeline. And there's numerous underlying causes on the slide that link and that are reason to contribute to those findings: promotion discrepancies, salary deficits, burnout, gender bias, and sexual harassment that are unique to female emergency medicine physicians. And so further understanding of this issue of attrition, of who's leaving the workforce, is particularly critical to inform employment recruitment and retention strategies. And so our two objectives were, first, to investigate the age at which female and male emergency medicine physicians exhibit attrition from the workforce, and also identify the number of years since residency graduation at the time that emergency medicine physicians exhibit attrition. The methods we used a repeated cross-sectional analysis study design. We used publicly available Medicare data from 2013 to 2020, which had robust clinical practice billing data at the summary level. And we additionally used gender, which Medicare dichotomized at the physician level as male and female. We linked that to American Board of Emergency Medicine certification data, which had date of birth and residency graduation date data for the physician. Physicians were considered to be included within the emergency medicine workforce if they billed at least 50 reimbursements within one of the study years, within that 2013 to 2020 timeframe. And those 50 reimbursements had to be the typical emergency department care that we are reimbursed for, the level 1 to level 5, the 99281 to 99285 codes that make up hospital and facility-based emergency care. We defined attrition, the way we defined attrition is identified on the slide. So physicians 3 and 4 on this diagram would have been identified to exhibit attrition. They were present within the workforce within up to 2015 and 2017 respectively, but were not identified in any of the subsequent years. So that's important for attrition. They could not be identified with any of the subsequent years. Physician 5 exhibited temporary attrition, meaning they came back in the workforce. This was not the focus of our study and made up a smaller proportion of those who did exhibit attrition. So the focus was solely on permanent attrition. We do have a sensitivity analysis if interested. Our outcome was the median age at the time of attrition. And again, the example physician is listed on the slide. The way we conducted data management, the physician was identified to perform at least 50 services within 2013, 2014, and 2015, yet did not perform services within the 2016 to 2020 data set, and so they met that outcome of attrition. We conservatively use the date of attrition, as it could not be determined exactly, as December 31st of that year. The other two outcomes that we identified were the number of years since residency graduation at the time of attrition. So we identified the population that did exhibit attrition between 2013 and 2019, and then retrospectively looked back and used the residency graduation year that we had to identify the number of years post-residency that they were in the workforce. We additionally wanted to identify the risk that residents will leave the workforce prospectively. And so we used the 2013 to 2015 data sets to track those physicians at least 5 years in the future to see if they remained in the workforce, to give us a prospective analysis with complete data. Additionally, we estimated a logistic regression model with the outcome being attrition and the key independent variable being gender. We controlled for the log transformation of years. Since residency graduation, we did not include age within the model as it was collinear with residency graduation years. We additionally included an interaction term between gender and the year since residency graduation, given the dynamic changes in the workforce more recently. Results-wise, we had about 40,000 emergency medicine physicians that performed services within at least one of the study years. On the left of the screen, I'm going to show you 2013 data. On the right, I will show you 2019 then. In the left of this figure, the violin plots, on the left, the male physicians are in blue and the female are in purple, and the age at which they left are on the y-axis. The median age of the about 600 male physicians that left the workforce in 2013 was 59.2, compared to 45.6 for the about 200 females that left in 2013 and were not in the workforce for any of the remaining years. Compared to 2019, about 1,500 male and about 750 female. And those differences, those disparities are still existent, with that age decreasing at the age of attrition to 53.5 and 43.7 respectively. Again, this is of those who do exhibit attrition. The residency graduation outcome is shown on the slide as well here. On the x-axis, we have the years since residency graduation. And again, this is solely among those who did exhibit attrition during the 2013 to 2019 years. On the y-axis, we have the number of emergency medicine physicians that exhibited attrition. In purple are female, and in light pink salmon are male. And you can see the differences in the curves in the longevity of the career of those who did exhibit attrition. The 4,300 male physicians who did exhibit attrition during that time did so at a median of 17.5 years after residency graduation. Female, about the 2,300 that exhibited attrition, did so at a median of 10.5 years after residency graduation. Prospectively, again, that 2013 to 2015 cohort that we had complete data looking forward, I showed the 2013 class as an example. That was about 1,500 to 1,600 residents, and that number has increased more recently. But 6% of the male physicians in that group were not practicing 5 years later, and about 10% of female physicians were not practicing, again, within the clinical E&M codes that I showed earlier. Similar numbers were present for 2014, with the ranges shown on the slide by gender. The logistic regression model, unsurprisingly, we see associations between gender and the year since residency graduation with the outcome of attrition. There was also a negative interaction term that we identified with an adjusted odds ratio of 0.86, suggesting that there was a larger difference in attrition for female more so than male, particularly for those more recently graduating from residency. There are limitations to this study. We included, again, this was Medicare, so the clinicians had to care for Medicare fee-for-service beneficiaries. Aside from pediatric emergency medicine colleagues, it's unlikely that there are a significant number of emergency medicine physicians that care for a markedly different payer mix that does not include Medicare. I think the biggest limitation and the thing to consider from this work is the E&M codes that we use. While that's typical 99281 to 99285 for our work, we can't tell from this work if these physicians transitioned to something else or what they did transition to. Did they retire fully? Did they transition to urgent care, telehealth, administrative roles, consulting? It's unclear from this. And the threshold we used of 50 reimbursements for emergency care could potentially introduce misclassification, but we did base that number on prior workforce literature. The exact date of attrition, again, we conservatively approach that, and we do not identify any risk of systematic bias between the genders. There's important implications from these findings. With female emergency medicine physicians exhibiting earlier attrition, that means a less diverse workforce providing emergency care to patients, and particularly enhancing the learning environment for trainees. Additionally, female emergency medicine physicians are unable to or have a less chance of influencing the greater healthcare landscape through leadership positions that are generally attained later in their career. And there's significant impact on the emergency medicine workforce shortage and surplus predictions, and in light of the recent match as well. And I'm happy to hear the match committee is going forward and looking at that. But I think that this work has significant implications of the entry into the workforce and the exit as well. This work's a clarion call to revisit strategies addressing recruitment, retention, and promotion of women in emergency medicine workforce. In conclusion, female emergency medicine physicians were over 12 years younger at the time of attrition in comparison to male emergency medicine physicians. Among those who did exhibit attrition between the study years, female physicians did so at 7 years earlier after residency compared to their male counterparts. Prospectively, 1 in 13 male and 1 in 10 female emergency medicine physicians were not providing the traditional hospital or facility-based emergency care services 5 years after residency graduation. Widespread disparities exist regarding attrition, and addressing the root of this cause is critical. Questions, and I had an acknowledgement slide, I apologize. I had an acknowledgement slide in there to acknowledge a few other members of the team, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Hello? You've shown that those women who left emergency medicine generally did so at a younger age than men who left emergency medicine during the study years. Do you have any slide or data on the percentage of the women who decided to leave during those years versus the percentage of men? There were then and still are more male emergency physicians than female. So if their absolute numbers if the men's absolute number are greater than the women's, that doesn't surprise me. Mm-hmm. I'm Vic and Totten, PGY 43, and still practicing.
Thank you. Yes, great question. I've included this appendix slide here shown. To your point, male physicians do make up a greater raw number of the workforce, and you can see on the left, you can see those numbers between 18 and 21,000 annually, and 6 and 9,000 female. And you can see the proportions that did exhibit attrition. Relatively similar between genders proportionally, but that age, again, is the new finding that was significantly less, a decade or so less comparison between genders.
Well, I'm Jeff Klein from Wayne State. I'm following my own instructions. Dr. Gettle, do you have the granularity of data to look at the number of shifts, roughly, the number of instances that the individuals who had attrition were working before they went out? Because you could hit 50 with maybe 4 shifts, something like that, 4 or 5 shifts. But that would be a lot less of an impact if 90% of these people were working 4 shifts and then went to 2, versus they were working 150 shifts and then went to 2. Do we have any way of showing something like that?
This is a great question. Not from the data, from the publicly available Medicare data right now. That would probably need prospective or survey-based studies, because there are issues if, we've talked as well about someone dropping from 1 FTE to 0.9 FTE to 0.8 FTE, and there are differences in the shift volume. So that is a great question, and one that probably future would need to be collected prospectively, and qualitative methods I think would have a great opportunity for this. Good, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gettle. And now for our final plenary of the morning session, we have Derivation of a Clinical Decision Rule to Guide Neuroimaging in Older Adults Who Have Fallen, presented by Kirsten DeWitt at Queen's University and McMaster University.
Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'm presenting on behalf of a large co-investigator team, and this study was a derivation study to create a decision rule to guide neuroimaging in older adults presenting to the emergency department after a fall. The study is funded by the Canadian Institute of Health Research, and it was run from McMaster University. We have no conflicts of interest. In Canada, older adults who fall constitute 3% of all the visits to the emergency department. And when we look at all cases of traumatic intracranial bleeding in older adults, 80% of these cases are associated with a fall on level ground. So the aim of this study was to prospectively derive a clinical decision rule which would exclude clinically important intracranial bleeding among older adults who attend the emergency department following a fall. The study was conducted in 10 Canadian emergency departments and 1 US emergency department. Patients were eligible to be included if they were at least 65 years of age and they'd experienced a fall within the previous 48 hours, and the fall had to be either from standing, from a bed, from a chair, or from a toilet seat. We excluded patients who had been previously enrolled, who left the emergency department prior to the completion of their workup, who lived outside of the catchment area, and we excluded any patients where the emergency physician left 3 or more of the variables collected on the research form as blank. Our primary outcome is adjudicated clinically important intracranial bleeding. We had an independent centralized adjudication committee which reviewed all CT scans. we determined that an intracranial bleed was clinically important if a patient underwent some sort of intervention for that bleed. And an intervention could include holding an anticoagulant, it could include being admitted into hospital, having neurosurgical intervention, or if their bleed led to death within 90 days. Our primary outcome included intracranial bleeds both diagnosed on the index emergency department visit and also within 42 days of their attendance. Our emergency physicians completed hard copy study forms at the time that they assessed the patient. They completed the forms before the patient underwent the CT head scan, and they collected data on 19 individual variables, which were historical variables, exam variables, and comorbid findings. Before we started the study, we identified 17 pre-specified variables which we would evaluate for potentially including in the clinical decision rule. These variables were age, sex, hitting their head when they fell, loss of consciousness or amnesia, a history of previous major bleeding, cirrhosis, prior ischemic stroke, chronic renal impairment, and clinical findings of the GCS being reduced from baseline GCS, signs of head injury of bruise or laceration, and a new neurological deficit on examination. We also included anticoagulant therapy, antiplatelet therapy, anemia, thrombocytopenia, and the clinical frailty scale. We derived the decision rule by creating 1,000 bootstrapped samples from the entire cohort. The statistician built a model for each one of those bootstrap samples, and then he tabulated the individual variables per the frequency that they appeared in the final model in each of those 1,000 bootstraps. He then built the rule by individually adding first the most common variable into the decision rule, followed sequentially by any subsequent variables which increased the sensitivity. And our aim was to make a rule that was at least 98% sensitive. So in total, we screened 5,056 patients for inclusion, and we ended up including 4,308. Of those 4,308, 139 were diagnosed with clinically important intracranial bleeding. 114 of those cases of intracranial bleeding were diagnosed on the index visit, and a further 25 were diagnosed during the 42-day follow-up. So the prevalence of intracranial bleeding in the cohort was 3.2%. You can see from the flow diagram here that 63% of patients had CT imaging of their head in their index visit. These are the description variables of the cohort. The median age was 83, and 64% were female. 50% of patients had a clear history of head injury, but 12% of patients, it wasn't clear whether they hit their head or not. And in 20% of patients, we had no way of knowing if they lost consciousness, and another 16%, we couldn't tell if they were experiencing amnesia of the fall or not. A quarter of patients were taking anticoagulant medications, and over a third were taking antiplatelet medications. The clinical frailty scale scores were distributed fairly evenly across the entire score. Only 5% of patients had a GCS that was lower than their baseline GCS, and only 6% of patients had new neurological abnormalities on examination. So here is the false clinical decision rule. The rule says that no head CT scan is required in the emergency department if your patient did not hit their head, if the patient remembers having had the fall, if there is no new neurological abnormality detected on clinical examination, and if they are either not frail or living with very mild frailty as per the clinical frailty scale. An easy way to remember the clinical frailty scale is this would apply to all patients who require no help for any activity of daily living, including managing finances and heavy housework. In this derivation cohort, the sensitivity for the false clinical decision rule was 98.6%, the specificity was 20.3%, and the negative predictive value 99.8%. We also developed an ad hoc second rule, which we ended up calling the focused falls rule. And we developed this rule because we realized that two of the predictor variables together could achieve a sensitivity of 95%. And we know that emergency physicians like fewer items in their rules. So for the focused falls rule, you would not order a head CT scan if the patient clearly did not hit their head and there was no new neurological deficit on clinical exam. The sensitivity is lower at 95%, and the specificity is higher at 38%. The negative predictive value is 99.6%. There are limitations with our study design. We did a previous cohort study with almost 2,000 patients, and we found that when you call older patients and ask if they've had intracranial bleeding, then the people who have had intracranial bleeding are least likely to acknowledge that they have. And in fact, patient-reported intracranial bleeding sensitivity was 30%. So we ended up, for this study, only following patients by chart review, including neurosurgical centers. When patients presented in the emergency department, the emergency physician could decide whether to order the head CT scan or not. And we know that only 63% of our cohort had a head scan when they first presented, so it's possible that a patient could have had an intracranial bleed that went undiagnosed, which they recovered from spontaneously, or they could potentially even have died with an undiagnosed intracranial bleed. And in Canada, if we were to implement this rule, we would very likely increase the number of patients who have a head CT scan rather than decrease. So to conclude, we've prospectively developed the first clinical decision rule for unselected older adults who have fallen, and our next step is to undertake prospective validation. Thank you.
Hi, Brian Zink from University of Michigan. I'm interested in the 155 people that were not enrolled because they had been enrolled previously, and with the idea that could some of them have been delayed hemorrhages after initial emergency department visit. Do you have any information on them in terms of whether they were admitted, had bleeds, would have met any of your criteria?
So the only data we collected on patients who were not enrolled or excluded was the percentage of intracranial bleeding, age and sex, but that was across all exclusion criteria. And they had similar age, similar sex distribution, and similar rate of intracranial bleeding, but we don't have any other information on those patients.
So one thing I was curious of, that clinical frailty score, which I think is important because you're saying if it's at all low, then all bets are off and you need to scan. What percentage of your population had that? Because I imagine in my department that would be very small. And secondly, what would you propose should be the appropriate testing threshold for a non-con head CT where you don't have the problem of contrast? And it would seem 95% sensitivity might not be good enough, that you probably need a higher one.
Sure.
Thanks.
So it was about a 50-50 split as to the number of patients who fell with our cutoff in the clinical frailty scale, which we use a cutoff of 5, this up to living with very mild frailty. Your second question relates to, what's the downside to doing a head CT, and I get that, but we all know, first of all, it's incredibly difficult sometimes to sedate these people safely for their scan. Secondly, in Canada, something like 9% of all our rural emergency departments actually have an on-site 24-hour CT available. So they potentially could be transported by 4 hours by road to get the head CT scan. And lastly, in Canada at the moment, we're seeing patients in the waiting room, in the corridors. Nobody's in a bed. We're seeing them in chairs. Anything that we can do to get them out quickly, because for us to order a CT scan in Canada, we're routinely waiting 4 hours for those results. Anything we can do is helpful. The longer the patient stays in the emergency department, the more likely they are to develop delirium, and then you're stuck. They're getting admitted, and there's no beds in the hospital. So that's kind of the context to asking the question for us. Thanks.
We have time for one more.
Hi, Scott Dresden from Northwestern University, also the immediate past president for AGEM. First, I would like to congratulate you on winning the Academy of Geriatric Emergency Medicine Best Abstract in at SAEM23. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And second, I'd like to ask about the clinical frailty scale. Who performed that measure?
Yeah.
Who performed that
great
measure?
question. So it was the treating emergency physician who had to check off which category the patient fell into. I would like to think the physicians are accurate, but we don't know that, and we don't really have good enough CAPA scores to know. But I know that the score is applied, for example, in the UK in triage in many hospitals, and it has shown to be validated and correlate with patient outcomes. So yeah, I believe it's probably the easiest one to apply, and probably the best one for us in the emergency department.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
And that ends our morning session and officially begins SAEM23. Good luck getting to your 11 a.m. sessions, and thank you all.